Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
The comments and views expressed on The Moore Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The Moore Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from Amsterdam and across the world online. You're now watching The Moore Show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined with my guest, Miguel Mendonca. Now Miguel is an author based in Bristol, England. And after studying and working in forestry, he gained an honours degree in geography and history and then studied social science and environmental ethics at a postgraduate level. Now, after publishing a collection of short fiction in 2011, he began to research the ET field in depth. In 2015, he co-authored Meet the Hybrids with Barbara Lamb, a study of the lives of 8 ET human hybrids living on Earth. His new book, We Are the Disclosure, is a 2-part work exploring the development of the UFO ET field over the last 70 years, through interviews with 27 people who have experienced and contributed to it in various ways. Miguel Mendonca, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. Lovely to be with you.
You don't really mean that. This is the second time I've retaken this. Let's not lie. Let's not lie to them. You're yeah. I'm holding you in the seat right now just to make this happen. Yeah. Okay. Well, we had a slight problem on my end, so we had to redo this. So we were 7 minutes in, and we're not too sure where we got to. So what we're going to do? We're going to retake this differently. We're gonna try to be a bit more snappy here, which is probably a good thing, to be honest with you. Okay, so let's start this from a different perspective then. So when you had a break from writing the first book that you did with Barbara Lamb, and I'm going to link that interview just at the bottom of this video because you've already been on previously with Meet the Hybrids. It was during that period, that break period over the Christmas period, because I think I was, as you said previously, I was your first interview you had, that you got the chance to work on We Are the Disclosure Part 1, or at least the idea, right? And why are you doing this? Why have you not teamed back up with Barbara Lamb? Why have you gone solo? Why this book? Why the ufology thrust now for you?
Okay, there's about 3 questions there. So where did it come from? In the discussions with Barbara, I worked with Barbara on Meet the Hybrids because it was the most appropriate thing to do. She was acquainted with the hybrids and was somebody that they could trust. You know, she's known quite a number of them quite a while, so she could broker that contact. Nobody knew me. I was completely new, at least in a professional sense, in the field. So Barbara led on the structuring of the interviews, and but over the course of that experience, when we talked about the subject of disclosure, Barbara would always make the point that right now we are the disclosure, the people that since the beginning of this whole field in the late 40s have been sharing what we know, and that could have been from the government level, people like Ruppelt and Kehoe, people that had a strong awareness of what was going on in the government's investigations, let's say, and then you have all of the other people, all of the other experiences of different types, whether it's just a sighting or it is contact, encounters of different kinds. And when we had, so that's kind of where the term "We Are the Disclosure" came from, and those were the kind of early discussions that planted a seed. But when I'd finished the work on Meet the Hybrids and put the book out there, and then I started to look at the kinds of sort of level of debate and discussion in the field, I felt like, from everything that I'd come to understand from the hybrids in terms of their understanding and the connections they have with the beings, that there is so much more information available to us than the field is in general recognizing. So it seemed to me, taking those two things together, that it was time, given that we're heading for the 70th anniversary of Roswell and Kenneth Arnold sightings, I felt like 7 decades, that's a pretty good time to step back and take a good look at the field and see what have we learned and where are we. And for me, I like discussion. I want to hear, I want to get it from the horse's mouth. So I went, I used the same methodology, and I basically picked people who could represent the different facets of this subject, from those who deal more with the kind of material, technological aspects, then kind of moving along the spectrum into the kind of political areas. Then you have people doing the sort of more, well, it gets more sort of biological in terms of their interest in the beings, and then it gets more metaphysical and spiritual in terms of the kinds of transformations personally that are triggered by encounter experiences. So that's where it began.
Okay. And just remind us as well, what was your interest in ufology before Barbara? Because now these two books, Disclosure Part 1 and We Are the Disclosure Part 2, are big books. This looks like it's taken on a life of its own from yourself. There must have been something prior.
Well, yeah, I started at age 5. I was given my first book on UFOs by my father at that point, and I was just completely fascinated by and drawn to the subject since then. But I met very few people in my life that shared that interest. A lot of people, it's like I found this in, I put a decade into the environmental subject in my studies and my work. And I found it was similar. There's some subjects that a lot of people just find too big. They just don't think on those levels. They are very concerned with the here and now, with feeding their family, with just living a normal life. There's a lot of things that I think people find intimidating on many levels, and so they don't want to get involved. It's not, and I think people kind of recognize the intellectual investment, perhaps even the emotional investment that comes with opening those doors. And I've actually found many parallels between the environmental subject and this subject, and you find that coming up time and time again. If you are sensitized to it, you'll realize, oh, there's that subject again. There's that kind of crossover. And I think, one of the things that really jumped out at me from the research undertaken by FREE, the Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters, I interviewed Rey Hernandez.
Oh, yes.
One of the co-founders for this book. And we've got 4 or 5 pages of headline statistics, headline data points and fascinating. A lot of things that I didn't expect. But that really jump out are that over 70% of people felt that their experiences were positive, because you get a fear message left, right, and center in this field. It does, the unknown is, humanity's greatest fear on every level. But for the people who are experiencing encounters, there tends to be, in over 2/3 of cases, a sense that they are positive. And 70% also report positive life changes, positive personal transformation in terms of becoming more spiritual, less materialistic, less interested in competition, less interested in organized religion. They tend to cross some kind of threshold through these experiences, and I would say the same has been true of myself, although I guess I already had those kinds of concerns. But I think that it's particularly interesting to hear from experiences in terms of what these experiences really are and what they are for them. Everybody has their own interpretation, but when you compile this kind of body of data, as Free have done, you begin to get some really interesting material that you can really work with, that I think it is going to help to reshape the general understanding of what this field really is, what it involves, what it means. And that is one of the things that I've gone after in the book, trying to kind of find that meaning in it.
Absolutely. And okay, well, let's start with some different questions here that you've not been asked before. Now, this is going to be a bit off the cuff, so be prepared. I've got a lot of black friends, and we discussed the UFO topic quite a bit. And it was interesting what one of them said to me. You never really see that many black people in the UFO community. You never hear of black abductions or other ethnic minorities. It seems to be a very white person experience. Isn't that odd?
Well, I had this conversation with Alexis Brooks, who is an African-American radio host and writer, and she's the first person interviewed because it runs, generally alphabetically. So she's first up in book one, part one. And we had this conversation, and she said it's not that, no pun intended, it's not that black and white. And certainly if you read John Mack's book, Passport to the Cosmos, I think it is, he's gone all over the world looking at this subject, and he has found this phenomena active absolutely everywhere he's been. And it seems to me that it is, I don't think it's the case that it is a very kind of, oriented towards white people necessarily, but it just, for some reason, it has that visibility. We found this in the environment movement also, particularly in England. In the States, it may be less so. And, we were aware of, very interesting, grassroots work done by African Americans, Mexican Americans, Hispanic people. Most of these communities connect with these subjects, but it may be that the white media does not pay as much attention. I'm sure it's a more complex phenomena than it appears to be, but then I would say that's true of absolutely everything.
I would say so. If I wonder how many UFO sightings are in Asia, in some parts of the year or years gone. And other India, and other places.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there are, but maybe it's not their top priority in some sense. Maybe that some of the third world countries have different priorities than to even have the time to investigate such things. Maybe that's the case. I do remember the Betty and Barney.
It comes up all the time. I mean, you're always seeing footage that's apparently being filmed all over the Indian subcontinent and Asia and all the rest of it. But the thing that jumps out at me is the third interview in part one is with Michael Cremo, because I wanted to kind of pull in his understanding of, I went in wanting to look at the kind of forbidden archaeology, the kind of ancient aliens side of things, but the thing that dominated that interview, and the thing that I was most struck by, was the fact that if you, as he set out, if you look at particularly the Puranas, the ancient Sanskrit writings, it is absolutely filled with references to these other beings, to interaction with all kinds of, what today we would consider extraterrestrials, and their flying craft, the Vimanas. I mean, there's been a lot written on the subject. And then interviewing Rita Louise, Dr. Rita Louise, she looks at, we discuss in detail the kind of mythological record and what that tells us. And she said, you find the same group of gods everywhere, all over the planet. She said, if you read the narratives are different, but if you look at the iconography that sits alongside those narratives, the figures are essentially the same. And I think that's, one of the aspects of this subject that there has been much made of, and, I confess I gave up on Ancient Aliens after about season 3, but I think the point was made. And I'd read, von Däniken in the 80s and into the 90s. And I think that this kind of narrative that's been set up over the course of time, that someone else was here with advanced technology, I think that's pretty well established at this point. And I also talked with Jerry Wills, who, is a healer and explorer and musician and radio host, and he does many, many different things in this field. And, he and his wife, Kathy, they used to, certainly Jerry used to lead trips, down in South America, where he had encounters with Pleiadians in the Andes. And this was ongoing contact for quite a period of time. So it seems like almost anywhere, if you throw a dart at the map of the world, you'll find stories there.
Right.
It's just do they get collected? And you also have to consider the language barrier. I'm talking now with a friend who has been part of the Rama group, the Rama contact group in Peru for decades. And so we're looking at how I can involve one of those, one of her South American contacts in my next book. And it seems to me that if we had a sort of more active translation community in this field, we would have a much richer picture. I mean, Philip Mantle, who you interviewed recently, he is doing some great work finding these stories from all these different countries. He just sent me his new one on Russian USOs, working with Paul Stonehill. And then I think he's done one on Poland, one on Romania. So there are people who are going out looking for these stories, and I think that anybody you talk to who's really done the legwork globally, they will come back with these same stories.
Right. And one thing I was going to say as well, the Betty and Barney Hill story, Barney was African American as well, and that was back in, the abduction, was it back in the 50s? 60?
Oh my God.
Yeah, okay, 60-something.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think early 60s.
Yeah, so just I was going to point that out actually. But yeah, okay, very interesting that your research even went into that. And again, just remind us what you're trying to do with We Are the Disclosure Part 1 and Part 2. Is it really to say that, people like yourselves, people that want to take up the baton of shining the light on some of these UFO stories and releasing the stories themselves are the ones that are going to be part of the disclosure rather than, international governments ever disclosing the real truth that they know?
That's part of it. I mean, part of it is I just wanted to kind of put together a kind of people's history of this subject. If you think of it as a conference or you think of it as a documentary, you're lining up a broadly representative group of people who all can give you a piece of this picture. We use that metaphor all the time in this field, and I think it's absolutely apt that this really is a very, very complex jigsaw, and we are all bringing through different pieces of it and offering those. But we have a tendency towards specialization, towards division of labor in our culture, in our economic structures, really, I guess, a product of the Industrial Revolution, when people are suddenly creating these complex machines and these complex industrial processes, you need people who are skilled in all these different aspects, and I think that tendency towards specialization has only increased also through the academic system. I mean, it's absolutely everywhere. But what I get inspired by is the big picture, is what does this look like when we pull it all together? Now, I see in some ways We Are the Disclosures being a kind of spiritual successor to Jim Marrs' book, Alien Agenda, which came out about 19 years ago at this stage. And I loved that book. I still love that book. I thought it was one of the most important works on the subject. And he threw a statistic at me. He said that he thinks it may still be the number one selling book on the subject in nonfiction. It's gone into numerous languages and many, many reprintings, and it's a classic. And he was unafraid of the metaphysical aspects of this. And I have jumped into the metaphysical aspects of this with both feet. And because for me, that is one of the most important pieces of this whole picture. And it's one we absolutely can't ignore. I mean, and then I guess you get into definitions. When we got started, there were a lot of questions about ufology, about the definitions, about the evolution of the field, because what I was trying to do is pull together, across these 27 people, a sense of, what is the kind of collective picture of this, and are we still happy to call it ufology? Are we still happy to call it unidentified flying objectology? And to me, it's pretty clear that ufology is at best a kind of subset of this field. It's a subsection that deals with the more material aspects, the sort of technological, political, historical aspects of this. But I feel that where this is really going is into this realm of personal transformation. But then if you sit down and talk with the hybrids, you're into completely different territory. And you're then talking about the true nature of reality, quote unquote true, whatever that means. It's this deeper understanding of reality and how it is structured, and what it is to be human, what is the self, what are we really? Are we, just this kind of enlightenment idea of a kind of, a sort of computer on legs, this very kind of materialist, rationalist, reductionist version of existence, or are we something different? And my strong bias is, through personal experience, is that we're something very different, that consciousness is a highly complex thing. And in a way, what I wanted to do was to put together all of these different pieces and let everybody else, let every reader decide for themselves, what is their take on the thing when you bring it all together. Not everybody is interested in the material aspects. Not everybody is willing to get into the metaphysical aspects of this, but many, many, many people are drawn to it for different reasons. And what I wanted to do was to create what I felt was a timely, important, useful resource for people so that they could get involved with all of these different characters, with all these different narratives, and basically, I guess, go through that process of hopefully seeing their starting position as just that when I open this book, this is where I'm at, this is what I think this field is, and by the end of it, I hope that they will feel enriched by it. I hope that they will feel they've made progress in whatever form that may take. I mean, it may be that they had never really understood the importance of the political aspect, for example, or it may be somebody who had never really set foot outside the political aspect. And I think that has largely defined the field up till now. So I hope that this is going to offer everybody a certain amount of expansion.
Okay, absolutely. How long is each book? How many pages?
I think that they're both just shy of 300, something like that.
So they're a decent-sized book.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can see why. I mean, it's about 250,000 words, something like that. Yeah. And you can see why I decided not to publish it as one brick. Because I realized this is literally not going to fit through anybody's mail slot if it's in one piece.
Absolutely. And did you ask the same question to all the researchers in this field, or was it different questions, different angles?
It is a standard format so that the reader can read across all of the different responses. I think that's a methodology that's really important. I think it's for me personally, I find it incredibly useful. And, it seems to me from, all of the responses we got to meet the hybrids that was so. But there's enough, they're all open-ended. There's no, quantitative stuff in there. It's all open-ended, qualitative questions. So, numerous people gave me up to 45 minutes on question 1 alone.
Wow.
Just asking them, how did you get involved in this field? Clifford Stone and Lee Spiegel, I think that they're tied first place for the longest answers. And then some people I very quickly realized that all the stuff around definitions around the subject was very little interest, really, because I think the point was made and made well by a few people. And so I just often said to people, look, some people I even said, you can give me some written answers on this, and some people I just got some very terse responses to some of that stuff. But like Mary Rodwell, that's how I did it. I knew by the time I got to our interview that I just wanted some really kind of quick and dirty responses to some of the questions, but open up everything else for discussion. And I think she really goes to town on she really got the bit between her teeth on some of the answers, which is what I hoped for and exactly what I got. And I mean, it's a real privilege, actually, to work with all of these people and to have them answer my questions. I mean, it's an absolute blast, actually, for me personally, to read through the book and to have, people like Stanton Friedman and Jim Mars and Mary Rodwell and Lyn Buchanan, and, I mean, there's a very long list. Having these people all giving me their responses to these particular questions.
And was it difficult to get in contact with these people? Was it pretty easy in the end to contact them through? Yeah, it was. What?
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean,
it was easy. Yeah,
the people who are in the book are the people who are up for it, who understood what the approach was, who saw the value in it, and who had something to say.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly, I did not get everybody that I approached. One person who shall remain nameless said that they wouldn't get involved because disclosure would happen before I'd even got them published. So,
were you? Yeah. Well, I see. That's. I don't think. Well, personally, disclosure's never going to happen in my lifetime.
No, I mean, this line came to me as I was writing an article for Gary Heseltine's UFO Truth magazine. Only a fool asks a liar for the truth.
That's so true.
Why on earth, after the last 15 or 20 years, would you ever go to the government and ask them for the truth on something? I mean, weapons of mass destruction, just that alone. And then you have, the WikiLeaks and Snowden, and it just goes on and on and on and on. And we dig up more and more dirt on the authorities all the time. We had the MP's expenses scandal here, this MP's paedophile ring, which they've closed down as last I heard, they closed down the investigation. I mean, the police just dropped it. It's just vanished. Where did that go and why? And that's just one thing. And then, in talking with, Jim Mars, I had to ask him about the JFK assassination, what he'd concluded about that, and getting into the moon landings and things of that sort. And then, you have the whole, and I asked everybody, I just asked them one question: do you believe the subject has been suppressed? And believe me, they just go. And everybody basically comes back with the same response. They said it's money and power. Everything is always about money and power sooner or later at that level. That is really what governs decision-making on this planet. It governs decision-making, personal decision-making
Sure.
much of the time. Of course, you can introduce, personal, passion and emotion into that. But
so to just answer that, then, really, you probably would agree with me there in some respects. I mean, not that we may be completely right, but I mean, as far as we're concerned, it's not going to happen in our lifetime.
But what would they say?
Yeah, well, exactly.
That's another $1 million question.
Yeah.
What would they even say? I talked about this, a fair bit in the conclusion, which, oh my God, nearly drove me crazy. 3 months I worked on the conclusion.
I was going to ask you that. What is your conclusion in all this then? Because obviously you've now taken their truths, which are all different. What is now your conclusion in this?
Well, I mean, just on disclosure alone, it is that the only disclosure that will ever come forth with integrity that I can foresee is the personal disclosure. It is me telling you, you telling me, people sharing with one another, this is what I experienced. And ideally, that is in a safe, non-judgmental space. To me, that is the most authentic form of disclosure. It's when people feel they are in a place of trust, a place of safety, and they can say, well, this is what happened, and it's been happening for, 20 years or whatever. The idea that, another aspect of the top-down disclosure is that, again, if their interest is just money and power, that's the only way they're going to have looked at this. They are not going to be going after the spiritual, existential aspect of this. You know what I'm saying?
I do.
It's not on their radar. It's not their remit. It isn't even their job. I mean, somebody somewhere might have said, well, people are just not the same. That this is triggering this incredible spiritual growth, perhaps intellectual growth. It's changing the people who are experiencing it, often, and in the majority of cases, for the better. How is the government going to take any notice? Why would that be of interest to them? I can actually only see that would be a problem for the status quo, given that America is a nation that is so little separation of church and state. I mean, even when we got into a discussion with Professor Milton Wainwright, an English microbiologist who was launching these weather balloons over India and the United States and I think Iceland and Britain, and finding all of these basically extraterrestrial biological organisms up there. And he was saying that he collared somebody at NASA on this and said, why are you not looking for life anymore?
Yeah.
And they basically brushed it off. It seems to me, as far as I recall, didn't want to engage on that. But, he speculated that it's because NASA is federally funded for the most part, and they didn't want to upset the Bible Belt because it could be a real problem. Funding is always a problem at NASA if the movies have taught us anything. And it could well be that, he was saying that, there's many, many rumors they found life with Voyager in 1970. Is it Voyager? Anyway, I think the kind of Martian lander that they had at that point, and he said it just would upset too many people. It really would be a problem for the belief structure of many, many, many people. This is, I guess, one of the things that they really have to weigh up in terms of top-down disclosure. How many people are they willing to upset? Where do you go with the theological aspect of all of this? You could say that the Catholic Church have been doing their bit here and there to kind of get out in front of this. And of course, we know about the Vatican astronomers and all of that. And it seems to me that if anybody is going to really understand about this long-term involvement, it would be the Catholic Church. And that seems to be the case in terms of the statements they're making. The Mormon faith, have no problem with it. It sort of goes to the core of their belief system, as I understand it. So there's some religious faiths that wouldn't have too much of a problem with it, but there are a lot of people that wouldn't just not know what to do with it, and there would definitely be a period of adjustment for us all. There's no doubt about it.
Well, of course. I mean, but what about the conclusion as well, in the sense of what this phenomena is, maybe, and is it so spread out in different varieties that it's we're unable to put it under one roof? We wouldn't even know we don't even know what it is really. It's not what we think it is. Is that what the conclusion maybe is?
I think it's everything. I think that this is a way for us to understand absolutely everything. I mean, there is no aspect of human life, of human philosophical life, human spiritual life, maybe even human genetic life, that is untouched by this. I mean, it connects to absolutely everything. And I guess that's partly what I mean by, it can be a bit intellectually intimidating for people, because if you spend, let's say, 6 months on and off watching lots of videos on YouTube, as we've all done at some point, try to kind of try to feel around for the edges of this thing and see if we can find the borders of it. And I think most people begin to understand that this really does seem to connect to everything. And so what this really seems to be is the actual fundamental story of existence itself. That is where I've got to with it. I mean, like I said, you can go off in any direction there, but it is teaching us about consciousness, about the nature of the soul, the journey of the soul. It's talking about the structure of reality. It's talking about purpose, both individual and collective purpose. It's talking about a lot of stuff about the different forms that we can take, what Alfred Lambremont Weber calls exophenotypes. So you and I could have worked together, or we could be working together as, let's say, a species of reptilian in some dimension, on some level of reality. And 3 people have said to me that they have been visited by beings that have said, you've been wondering about your connection to Miguel. Well, this is Miguel in a different form. And 2 of those people were told that they work with me in other dimensions, in other forms. And one was a kind of, I mean, it just sounds barking to even say it, but one was a kind of neon pink jellyfish thing with yellow almond-shaped eyes. And who knows?
So this would be from the aspect of maybe the soul splits before it comes to this level, and that aspect of you somewhere else is incarnated into a different reality, a different existence somewhere else as well.
Mm-hmm. It seems to be the case. I mean, you hear of soul braids, soul forks, soul splinters, all of these ways in which our souls can actually become connected. I mean, Dr. Christiane Quiros, PhD in psychology, practicing therapist in California, she understood that she had a kind of soul braid with what she perceived as another consciousness, another kind of being, a sort of little girl that was connected with her. And it's Christiane that talks about cosmic choreography, this business of events becoming arranged so that each of us may make progress in our given mission. And that whether that mission is coming from us, or it's being given to us, or it's even a kind of higher self type of mission, like there may be another aspect of our consciousness elsewhere that is basically pulling our strings. I mean, I have had that feeling pretty much all my life, that that's what's going on with me, but it wasn't until I really got involved in this field and started having detailed discussions with many, many experiences that I started to get some of the language and concepts that would actually work with that. And I would hear other people basically describing the way I'd always experienced my life and consciousness.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've got to just move this on a little bit here as well. I mean, it's fascinating what you're saying. It really is. And obviously, these are nuts and bolts researchers, as well as sort of some of them enter into a new paradigm of research. But throughout this interview, we've kind of sort of touched on the idea of that this is more than just nuts and bolts. There's a consciousness aspect in here as well that's greater than what some of these researchers are aware of. So who are the new paradigm of researchers that are going into the direction of consciousness? Is that some of the people that are, getting messages from these other realities? Is the researchers now, has it now shifted to something different? They may not even call themselves researchers. It's more they're bringing through teaching information from these dimensions.
Yeah, I think that's true. But you can look at someone like Leo Sprinkle, who was, Dr. Leo Sprinkle was very senior at the University of Wyoming way back. We're talking 5.5 decades ago. He was doing research with experiences. He was pretty much the pioneer, as I understand it, at least. I'm sure there have been others, but he's the person I think of first when I think of the real pioneers in working with experiences and having them complete questionnaires. And he found that when he was doing counseling with people, he was getting these little kind of psychic impressions. And so he would share that with his clients. And often they would say, well, that's bang on. How did you know that? And then he said he was giving a lecture in Denver. I know that all wrong, but he was giving a lecture. And at the end, a guy was brought up. A couple of people came up to him. One was helping the other. The person being helped was blind and walking with a cane. But he said that he could clairvoyantly see Leo's guides. And I think one was a kind of blue light that was from some extraterrestrial source. There was a kind of Chinese or Tibetan monk. And I think it was a Native American. And from that point on, and I think some were added over time, but so there is an example of somebody who was a researcher way back when, yet he was very involved at the kind of metaphysical level, and this started to come through him. So when you talk about the kind of new researchers who are becoming teachers, I'd say, well, there's somebody who, and he's in his 80s now. Barbara Lamb is in her 80s now. She knew nothing about this subject until the end of the 80s, early 90s, something like that. And she has become a teacher in this. I mean, in terms of the lectures, which is how I got really active in this is because I saw one of her lectures, and it just flipped some switch in my brain, and I ended up writing a novel that involved her and the hybrids that she talked about and said that she knew, as well as a much sort of larger story. But I think that at all periods, people of all ages involved in this, I think people just do the thing they're here to do. Some people, like Stanton, he is in his 80s, but he's always been kind of a nuts and bolts guy. You know, he's just about, let's show that this is real, that this is here, that this is taking place, that the government are lying about it. Let's actually show them with their own documentation a lot of the time. And he has been one of the most successful, I would say, figures in the whole field. He's just stuck to what he's good at. He's a physicist. You know, for him, it's never been a kind of spiritual quest. Although I asked everybody I've interviewed, have you felt any sense of guidance in doing this? And he said, I certainly feel like something just said to me at some point, you know, you have all the skills to do this work, so let's get with it, man, was his actual phrase. And everybody said that they have felt guided either to do this or in doing it.
That's interesting.
And that guidance may take different forms. Isn't it just? I mean, it's just one of those things I thought, well, I'll throw it in there. I just felt compelled to add it because we'd asked that of all the hybrids. And I thought, well, yeah, that'd be kind of interesting to hear. And I thought a lot of people would brush off the question and say, well, I don't really understand the question. But everybody said they have felt guidance, although it may come in different forms. I mean, for some people, it's just about an endless series of synchronicities. I mean, like Lee Spiegel said, I sometimes talk to my guides. I don't even know if I have guides. I don't know if I have a guardian angel. It would be lovely to think so. I don't really expect an answer back, but I put it out there. And he said, so I don't have a sense of any sort of personified guidance, guides. But he said, I used to keep a synchronicity journal because there were so many things that just came together as he needed them.
Well, this is interesting then, because you're almost at this point of answering the question about your personal journey. And what personal journey do you think someone's going to take when reading these books as well?
Well, I think that comes back to where are they at? You know, what do they understand? What are they ready for? I think that's the same for anyone in anything. I mean, if you're, doesn't matter what it is, everybody has different sort of tendencies and skills and, their own unique, neurobiology. I mean, we're all absolutely unique. So everybody will find something different. Whether it is, I hope that one of the things that will happen is that everybody will start to join more dots. I feel this is one of the most important things in any society, in any culture, in any system, anywhere. Right. I think you need to have people that are aware of the system, at that level. And I think there is just too few of those kinds of people around. I mean, I think it's why there are so few books like this out there. I mean, Jim Mars did one 19 years ago. Richard Donan put one out 2 years ago, UFOs for the 21st Century Mind. But, I mean, I read it when it came out. I've been through it a couple of times. And he really doesn't, his skill set is around the political / historical, to some extent, technological aspects of this. That's at least my reading. And I feel that if we're going to put out, overview books, we actually have to write an overview. We actually have to incorporate the spiritual, metaphysical elements of this. Otherwise, you have a completely incomplete picture. And I just feel like that's a very limited utility to people. Okay, if you're going to specialize, I've got a whole library of specialist books on particular things. Like I just read Robbie Graham's book on silver screen saucers. Really interesting piece of work. The Aztec UFO incident, totally focused on one thing, but really gives you the depth and the detail.
Yes, it does. I know that book.
And like I said, I've got a library of these things. But I feel, for myself, I wish We Are the Disclosure Part 1 and 2 was available when I started to research this. Because, as I say, I loved Alien Agenda, and he did talk about the metaphysical aspects, but not in any detail. It sort of wasn't, didn't really get there, but he was at least recognizing it. And so what I've tried to do is to create the most complete overview that's ever been written on this subject.
And that's very admirable. That really is for what you're doing as well. But I think it has changed you, though, hasn't it? All this work.
Undoubtedly. Yeah. I mean, it would take longer than we have to really open that up.
Of course.
But I feel very, very different being on this planet now. I feel very different in human society, and in a better way, in a less, I would say, alienated way. I feel like I understand myself much, much better. I feel like I have a better handle on humanity. I mean, I've always been studying, humans and human nature since I've been here, as I guess we all have, in our individual ways. But I've really felt quite external to it all. I mean, it should be no surprise whatsoever that I ended up as a social scientist, because that is the position of a social scientist, is the kind of insider, outsider. And I feel like as a result of all of this, I understand that much better now. But I would also say that I have let go of needing this to be any particular thing. It's when you, I've interviewed 32 people in 3 books, and when you do that, and you do all of that time, all of that editing, all that working with the material, looking at all these different takes on it, I think it almost inevitably has an effect where it loosens you up. You realize, or you're reminded, that there are so many different takes on this, and each person is living their sovereign personal journey in all of this. It's whatever that person needs it to be at any given time.
Yeah.
And that's not where I was at the outset. I just thought there was going to be a sort of firm final thing.
Yeah.
But I guess I know enough to know.
Let me ask you this then. What is one of the most important messages of your work then so far now?
I think what it comes down to is being able to at least open your mind, open your heart, recognize that there are so many different experiences and interpretations, and that whatever interpretation you have, it's incomplete. Of course it's incomplete. I mean, why would it not be? So, let's sort of loosen up in terms of our take on this. Let's not decide ahead of time what it is. I think the most important thing we can do is, again, with authenticity, bring forward, share what it is we have experienced. I mean, you are a conduit for all of that. I mean, you are absolutely living the kind of thesis of this book, is that we need to share this stuff.
Yeah.
That's the only way we're really going to develop our understanding, but it doesn't stop at the intellect. It's not something that can be understood in any kind of depth, not even breadth, if you are limited to intellect alone, unless you are actually able to kind of open the heart and experience this on a kind of deeper, more open, more profound kind of level. I think that you will be almost willfully constraining your understanding of it. And if it's something that, if it's important to you to really understand it, then I think that must be part of the process. But again, everybody is here for whatever they are here to learn and experience. For some people, the material is the only thing that matters. Actually, nothing else does matter to that person. That's what they're here for. And that is their sovereign right. So there is no, to me, there is no law that says everyone has to know everything about everything and everyone has to be interested in everything. And do you know what I mean?
True.
It's just, we know that the world is not like that. And it, in a sense, it would be pretty boring if it was.
That is so true. No, absolutely. And, I've let you talk a lot in this interview because I just wanted to let you get it out because there's a lot in these. To get 2 books into an hour, which we're just going to be over on this, is a lot. And we've barely touched it. But we've tried to get them. I've tried to get you to get the most important parts out. I'm trying. What would be? And you've got a website for this as well, which is crazy because I know how much work you've had to put into doing the 2 books. But your website is.
Well, it's just wearethedisclosure.com.
Well done.
I mean, there's really not much on there because, like you say, I've been hell for leather for 8 months.
Yeah. It's like giving birth, isn't it? What you've done here, in a sense, with this information.
Oh,
yeah.
Boy. It was, getting the conclusion done. I'm still not happy with it. I took a very, I guess you'd say, creative route.
Yeah.
It was 23 pages. Yeah. It was over 10,000 words, and I just thought, man, this is crazy. And I have rewritten it from scratch, I don't know how many times, because every time you do it, every single day, this, your own understanding is constantly evolving.
Yes, and it's still...
You are... Yeah. Whether it's dreams or it's little experiences or little memories or conversations we're having, we're in a constant state of evolution. So what can you do but make your peace with it and say to people, listen, this is just my understanding as best I can express it today.
Okay, now these are very new out, really, in the bigger scheme of things, right?
Part 2 came out yesterday.
Wow. Okay, so just yesterday. Well, I appreciate you coming on my show so soon. Okay, so what would you see? It's very difficult to answer this, and we're gonna have to be quick here as well. But would you see any more books in this field, or?
Yeah. I believe it or not, I ordered the bound proof of part 2 so I could begin the proofing and corrections, and I thought, fabulous, after like 8 months, now I can just lie on the couch for 4 days and kind of, recover a bit of my sanity. And within a minute or 2 at the most, I suddenly, as I was lying there, I believe I was given the next book, because my thoughts were just drifting. And suddenly I had the title, I had the list of participants, I had the question structure. I had probably 80% of what the final book will be.
My gosh.
And it was just suddenly there, and I may be starting the interviewing for that this week.
Oh my gosh. Miguel, wow, that's incredible.
What can you do?
Well, good. Well, listen, my friend, I'm going to get you back on again. I cannot believe I had you on last December with Barbara Lamb, and we're only in October, and you've done this. So I can, wow.
I can't believe it
I
either.
cannot believe that, because I know what effort it takes to do these types of books. It is crazily insane sometimes. So, just hats off to you for what you're doing for ufology. And you are an inspiration for others to come forward and do their part if they wish to do so as well. Because we don't have to have a specialist background in anything to sort of come into this field. Just the right sort of open mind in a sense, and if you really want your mind bent like a pretzel as well, like Dolores Cannon would say, then please welcome in. It's been fascinating speaking to you. It really has. We are over time right now, so I'd just like to say, Miguel, thank you so much for joining us today.
That's a pleasure.
Well,
Anytime.
we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.com, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.